I'm sitting here today with Dr. Marla Crawford. And she's going to give us a little, first of all, an introduction on who she is and what she do.
Yes, I'm Dr. Marla Crawford. I have a background in special education leadership. I'm a career educator of over 30 years. I'm a part-time professor, adjunct professor for Avery University, and one of several founding educators of an international high school, as well as an advocate for the rights of students and parents that are with disabilities.
We are standing right now, and your back is facing the Lee statue. Can you give us a little history on the statue, what it means, and how the statue is facing head up, head down, the tail, the whole 9 yards with that?
Yes. The statue has symbolism, and it's a part of a history and time before the Reconstruction period. And when that statue was resurrected, when you look at how the Confederate statues are on monument, that particular statue has his head up, his head down, facing the South. That means that the South was defeated. You have to look at the history behind the statue. And his back is to the North because they were fighting a worthless cause. And if you look at the history behind Robert E. Lee, it distinctly states that that's what it was. That statue represents a time in history where they were fighting a worthless cause such as white supremacy and slavery.
Now, if you look at where we are today with the painting of the monument, what is the symbolism behind that?
I think that from a professional standpoint, the symbolism behind the painting is a place and time where we are in a continuous thrive for equality and civil rights for all. So it's just a continuation of the civil rights movement in a different generation.
Where do we go from here? How do we organize the youth to make changes? Or how do we bring the youth and your seasoned veterans together for conversation?
The first thing we need to do as leaders, we need to look at our educational system, and we need to rewrite our curriculum to encompass all individuals that have made an impact on the history. Because when you look at the history book, they just think when it comes to people of African descent, it was just about slavery. And they need to understand that the first president of the United States, John Hanson, was a black man. They need to understand that he was the head of the Senate. So as you look at the session of that, you understand what's happening with the Constitution. And that takes me to that fact about history. In our Constitution that we still have today, it's still written in that Constitution that citizenship is not intended for individuals of African descent. That needs to be stricken from our Constitution because that's going to start the process for equality when it comes to the legal system, and then it's going to trickle down to education. We need to get the legal system on board. We also need to look at the 13th Amendment, abolishment of slavery. If you read the original context of that amendment, when you get towards the end, even though there's an abolishment of slavery, it tells you except for those individuals that are incarcerated. And I'm paraphrasing that because I don't have the actual reading directly in front of me. And we need to strike that portion from that amendment. So we need to do some more amendments to our Constitution and our amendments themselves.
I just gave you a little piece of paper to look at.
Yes.
Can you explain that and tell me what that was all about?
That paper basically talks about humanity and about equality and human rights. And it connects itself to the biblical teachings when it comes to Moses. And keep in mind, our legal justice system, it says, "In God we trust" on our money. And then you have the symbolism behind every judge's bench. And what we're doing with our present day government when it comes to the legal judicial system, we're in opposition to human rights.
If we go back to where we are today, what is the process that we need to take to be able to make change? Because it seems as if what's being said, that the fundamental basis of where we are is wrong. How do we correct that?
As I stated before, we need to come together as a joint powers of all tiers of government. and we need to correct the United States Constitution, because you can't claim equality for individuals, but then your Constitution saying citizenship is not intended for individuals of African descent. That is like a contradiction to what we are supposed to be standing for. And the problem is we put laws on the books, but we never take the old laws off the books. So then you give that open leeway. So when it comes to the legal system, education, employment, housing, individuals that are of African American descent, that individuals that are colored, individuals that are brown, however we choose to characterize them, we are constantly being disenfranchised. And there's no such thing as equality. And this is what I call a false consciousness, meaning that you want people to believe something that is true, but it's not there.
If we look at George Floyd, what happened to him, how did it prick our conscience to where we are today?
Well, we, as a culture, we've always been struggling and fighting the cause. And sometimes people have gotten a little passive. So now what we do, we have our movers and shakers like we had in the 1960s. So what you're doing, you're seeing a cycling back of history with your advocacy. You know, you have advocates that are fighting the school districts, the state, about education. Now they're fighting about rights. And when you look at what happened to Mr. Floyd, we watched a murder in real time with no regard for human life, which goes back to that concept of slavery, when we were not considered to be whole people.
Have you seen or watched the movie Just Mercy?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Now, in order for us to make a difference, to make a change, what do we need to do?
We need to set up, first of all, we have restorative justice. That is a topic that is hot and is heavy, and it actually originated in Australia with the Aborigines, as well as this African ceremony where we actually restore and heal those individuals that have been harmed. But we need to implement it correctly, such as how we train individuals in our community. That means leadership in the community as well as educators on implementing restorative justice. And I can say that from a professional standpoint because I'm certified by the Virginia Supreme Court on restorative justice and transformation. And so we need to look at how we're implementing that. We need to put the funding to educate individuals on how to do it effectively. We need to also give guidance and support to make sure that it's there. And because we're having so many challenges with those individuals that are at an academic disadvantage, but we also have the other side that is joining in and saying this is not right. So the youths are coming together saying it's not right. So we as elders or the older generation, we need to say, oh, it's not right. And we need to start listening. That's the first thing, to be an active listener. Not to react, but to listen and receive the information and then develop a course of action. But we need to put the appropriate team players at the table. People that have a balance and a neutral perspective, because me personally and professionally, from a professional standpoint, I believe that the statutes need to remain. I think we need to do it from a historical perspective. We need to resurrect statues or the little pallets that talks about who Robert E. Lee was, what he stood for, and address that. And then we need to talk about the graffiti, the markings, and what the people are saying. Because all of this is about a history. You can't erase history. The only thing you can do is educate people on it and move forward. Then we need to look at how to resurrect other statues and monuments that represents individuals of African American descent, Native Americans, as well as your Latino Americans, because your Native Americans and your Latino Americans were here well before the Europeans came over. So we need to tell history like it should be, because awareness is the most powerful tool we can have to move forward.
I guess right now I need to go backwards a little bit so the audience can understand. Explain what is restorative justice.
Restorative justice, in layman's terms, is just a practice. It's originally a ceremonial type practice where individuals come together and you have your person that offended present and the person that was offended or harmed. And you have a mediator You can do it one-on-one if it's something within one individual. If it's something within a community, you can do it from a community perspective because we have the police involved in a lot of this. I would encourage it from a community perspective to restore. It's about restoration and healing, and then you can move forward.
Now, I look at what has happened in the last couple of days, and I do not see a mediator between the police and the protesters. What has to be brought about for them to start a dialogue or for them to have a conversation, for them not to come out here in riot gear?
Well, the first thing is you have people that are on opposite ends of the pole. So you are not going to get any balance unless you have someone that is neutral. So you need to find individuals that can understand the perspective of both parties and be the mediator, to guide the instruction, to have panel hearings, to have what you call think tank groups, to have discussion forums. You know, allow others to say this is what we need, this is what we have to have, and then the other side needs to say this is what we need to do. You don't need to come out in riot gear because you're imposing on their right to protest. You know, as long as nobody's doing anything harmful to another individual that will hurt them, then you can actually allow them to do their peaceful protesting because you're stifling them and you're still suppressing them. That's a form of suppression. You're keeping them from having a voice, and you should never remove a person's voice.
Now, I noticed that, and I've had conversations with individuals today, that the media is putting out what the state police is saying to them, and they're not having conversation directly with the individuals in the public. How do we change that narrative? What needs to be done?
Well, to change that narrative, they need to hire individuals that knows how to properly handle situations when coming to opposing parties and how to communicate, because keep in mind, our police officers have been trained to do things one way. And you have to look at the training, you have to look at the years of practice. So you're talking about unraveling what has been in place for years. And we need to look at how we're educating our police officers, and we need to get rid of that prejudice because the situation is very prejudiced in how it's being implemented.
Now I look at, I do not see an individual or organization to come up to be the arbitrator or the mediator between the police, history, and the protesters. How do you bring that together?
Well, the first thing you need to do, we as a community, we need to understand why that is. Because you have people that deal with internal and external conflict. They have their internal conflict because of how they feel in the inside, but the external conflict is what type of retaliation or backlash they're going to get. So you talk about people looking at their livelihood in terms of employment, housing, feeling safe in their homes if they don't have the point of views of another parties. So you're looking at a massive thing of retaliation. So we need to understand that. So to bring that together, the state or the locality, Richmond City, need to reach out to individuals that can be objective, that can provide some form of guidance on how to do this process. And be careful about always bringing the same individuals to the table, because sometimes when you're looking at the same individuals and you're receiving the same voices, you get the same outcome because you're not making a difference at all. You're given what you call, again, a false consciousness that you want to do something. And I'm sure many people do want to do something to correct it, but do you really want to do it, or you want to do it just in words and not in action?
I was out here talking with some young people today, and they're in their early 20s, and they are saying that they're being talked at and not talked to, and it's the seniors are saying it's my way or no way, and they're not listening. How do we change that narrative?
Well, first of all, what the young folks are actually saying is that people are talking to them just like they talk to slaves. They're directing them, they're dictating to them, and they're not humanizing them as people. So that's the first thing we need to do, is humanize them. And then we sit down with them and have a listening and active ear. Effective communication is the ability to listen more so than to speak, because you have to receive it. So first, the individuals that are on this side that's able to make the changes need to be willing to receive the information, and then you can start the process.
If you look at the statue itself and you see all of the artwork that's being put up there, what are the youth saying to the adults?
They're telling the adults that really we're picking up where our ancestors left off, or those that came before us. They're saying that the process has been too slow. They're tired. They've been impacted not only in their communities, but they've been impacted in the schools. They've been impacted as far as employment. So they're saying, no, we're going to push this thing. So they're taking the hands and they're pushing it, because the individuals in the 60s, they were making a lot of strides and a lot of movements, and then it settled down. But it wasn't enough. People got quiet. But they're saying it's not enough. We're going to push it even further because they're young, they have the energy, and they have more life to them. So they're taking it by the hand and they're moving it themselves.
If you look at the change between day and night, what happens out here in the park, you find that there are more white in the youth that are having confrontations with the police under the guise of Black Lives Matter. You have any idea what that is all about?
Well, that's what we call being privileged, and what the government and the legal system has always implemented. Even when you look in the schools, these youths know that when they were in school, if they did something inappropriate, they just got talked to, or their parents were called. If a child of color did something wrong, they were put out of school. The SORO officers were called on them, or they'll find themselves in front of a judge. And so they know that they can have a voice, because their voice has never been stifled. But individuals or youths of color, they've always been told what they can't do, and they know the least little thing that they do, they're going to see the consequence. A child of color would not deliberately go out and deface property that the government has control over. That's just not a part of the culture. Now, will they do it? You do have individuals that will follow a lead if they see someone else doing it, because they feel that if they can do it, then we can do it too. But ordinarily, you're not going to have children of color to be destructive like this.
What do you recommend the city to do in order to get a handle on what's going on, or having a dialogue with the youth? Because if that does not happen, every time the police come out here, they get that much more angrier, they get that much more stronger, they get that much more larger, and I feel as if somebody's going to eventually get hurt.
They need to have what you call town hall meetings, or what you call community-based meetings. They need a lot of these government housing and apartment units and communities. They have community centers. They need to the officials need to go into those centers or into those community developments. They need to sit down, and it needs to be open and allow individuals to speak, not stifle their voice. Don't censor. Accept what is said, because you're dealing with a lot of trauma, you're dealing with a lot of hurt, you're dealing with a lot of anger. So we need to allow those things to be expressed. But we need to start off setting up those points where we can dialogue back and forth, where there's questions and answers, and not pick and choose which questions can be asked, because everyone's voice and everyone's thought is important.
Now I sit here and listen to what you just said and said. How do you have a dialogue where we can agree to disagree and it becomes productive?
Well, we have to remove our personal selves from the conversation and become objective. And if you find that you cannot do that, then you need to solicit individuals that can have an open ear and an open thought process to drive that conversation. Because sometimes when we have been taught, trained, and it's a part of our natural habitat or being, we're going to act accordingly even if we don't intend to. Because I have known cases where individuals have acted in a manner for which they were very truly and sincerely sorry and apologetic for it. But it's a part of their culture, it's a part of who they are, it's a part of their rearing. And it doesn't matter whether you are of European descent or African American descent. You have it going on both sides of the aisle. So we need to change that. We need to look at how to bring people into the circle that can be that listening ear.
We talk about the circle, bringing people into the circle. Why is it that the leaders of the city has not came together with the protesters to have a dialogue? Excuse me.
Well, from a professional standpoint, I think it has something to do with social economics, statuses. I think it has something to do with economics. Who's driving this place? Businesses, the money. So you're talking about trying to please those that can help you get reelected, that can put funding. I'm pretty sure if we look at some of the monies and contributions, we're going to find out why certain things are happening within our society as a whole.
Now, I sit here and I look at change. You look at how peaceful and quiet it is out here. But when it becomes dark, you have a completely different group of individuals that come here, not to support, but to make their change. Or how do we get individuals from saying, look, these are black folks out here tearing up the city?
Well, from a professional standpoint, from videos that I've seen, from actual live photos that have been sent to me electronically, I'm finding it's not the individuals of color, not the black and brown folks. And so you have individuals that will bring a rioting situation for a form of retaliation just to continue to defame, criminalize, and put people of color in their place. And what's happening, because people of color have been stereotyped as being aggressive and violent and uncivilized, it's easy for the culture of the society to point the finger at them, when truthfully, when I saw what was happening and I was listening to the media, just recently they started showing the faces of individuals. And when you look at the percentage, you have very few, if any, people of color. The majority, I'm going to say about 90-95% of the individuals have been people of European descent that you're seeing in the actual videos doing that. I remember looking at the news one night and they were talking about individuals with trucks and motorcycles and all this armory. You are not going to have people of color roaming like that in the city, because we already know that if we walk on the wrong side of the street, we're going to get stopped and we're going to get locked up.
So it's almost like saying we're looking at night, it becomes a police state.
Yes.
People are coming out here taking selfies. What are they expressing? What is the built up emotion, the tension? Almost all over the country, it has died down, except here in the heart of the Confederate.
Because this is the heart of the Confederacy. This is where the line is drawn when it comes to slavery, when it came to the Civil War. This is where it's at. And so you're talking about when you had your colonies formalizing, you got to understand Virginia this is where the slave auction took place in the Shackle Bottom of Richmond City. So you got a lot of historical context for a group of people that have always been dehumanized and demoralized and made less of a person. So it's going to be live and well. And then we tend to be a little more outspoken than some places. And that's just the culture of our society here.
Take me back in history in terms of relationships, mentality. What are we going to do as a community, or what will it take as a community to defuse and understand what's going on?
As a community, we need to sit down and have active dialogue. We need to be able to listen. I can't stress the importance of listening. That's the most powerful tool any of us can have, because we tend to react to everything, but we don't take time out to receive it. So we have to, as a community, we have to receive what's going on. Then we have to look at how we are implementing it. Because I've been watching on the news where there are threats that are being made out if individuals come out to protest. what they're going to do, what the authorities are going to do. The community has already been put on notice. We're coming after you. We're going to maintain that law and order that was expressed from the White House. And so now you have people that's going to rebel and retaliate. But then when I understand what's going on, everything's peaceful. You have individuals, because they're getting inside of their personal feelings, because people may find out where they are living at or where they are working at, and they get very personable about it, and they're not recognizing what the real issue is.
Take me back mentally and what's going on in these youth minds, and how do they become organized to get to where we are right now?
Well, when you talk about history, youth have always been made to be quiet. I know you had some of your radical folks that were doing some things in the early 60s, but they were very minimal youth were involved. You had people, maybe like college students, but we have babies now as low as elementary school that are crying out because of their mothers and their fathers and what's happening to them with the legal system. Our community is so traumatized. So what you get what you call pure trauma from these individuals. And we have to learn we need to get the psychologists and the social workers involved. And they need to be a part of the process and how to implement effective strategies to try to bring about this healing process. What things can be done to value all individuals, not just a handful of individuals.
Now, there was a moratorium placed on evictions. As of Monday, the moratorium is being lifted. They are saying that it's 1,900 people here in the city of Richmond that eviction is possible. The mayor has said that only half of those individuals might qualify. But I've heard some tenants say to me, if they get evicted, they can't live there. Won't nobody live there. Where are we at on that? What do we do?
Well, as an individual and a community activist for youth and people that are disenfranchised, I don't think the moratorium needs to be uplifted. Now that the city has the funding, they need to get with the court system and see what monies are owed by the constituents or the stakeholders in the city. And they need to distribute that funding to salvage the housing for those individuals that are in front of the court system. It shouldn't be about if you qualify. A lot of what's happening here is a part of what has gone on with this pandemic. Then you have a lot of people, and you talk about jobs lost, lack of income. There are a lot of things that are happening that hasn't been resolved. You still have people that are unemployed. You have people that are working part of the time versus what they normally would do. You have people that are supposed to be getting unemployment. They still haven't received that, so you can't ask somebody to pay a bill if they're not getting any income. So the money that we have the city needs to get with the court building, the John Marshall Court building, find out who's evicted, find out what the money is, and distribute those funds at least to the point where no individual will be more than 30 days behind in their rent.
By being a professional mediator, talk to me about the mindset of individuals who have been working and all of a sudden the pandemic hit, no money is coming in, no kids not going to school, they're at home all day, they're trying to shuffle feeding the kids, and then you got the bills. Where are they in terms of their mindset and having no outlet or nobody to talk to?
They are even more traumatized than they were before, because if you notice, most individuals within Richmond City itself live paycheck to paycheck. So they're already struggling just to make ends meet and to keep things in focus. So now you have the pandemic that actually removed what income they did have. So that escalates. As we know, children are very active individuals. They can be very busy. And one thing that the schools were offering for the children during the course of the day is a certain level of guidance and structure and education and development. So you have children are getting restless. if you understand the development of children, they get restless when they don't have things to do. So then you're talking about a parent or guardian that's already frustrated, they're stressed, and I'm pretty sure that what's going on just from a social economic status is having an impact on their health. I've met with many people that their blood pressure has gone up, they're having issues, near stroke, and then they don't want to go get help because every little thing you go get help for, they tell you got COVID-19, and everything is not that. So people they just don't know what to do. They feel trapped. They feel like they're in prison in their own home and in their own life.
Now, if you look at that side, what is the business community thinking of? Where is compassion? Where is empathy? Where is help for the least of these?
Well, I think that when we look at what's going on, I understand they have done things under the CARES Act for businesses to get small business grants that are forgivable, and it's okay to do that, but you also have individuals that are already established, and then you have individuals that have nothing. And we do want to exemplify equity, but we also need to create balance. And it's very important that we look at those that are severely disenfranchised first, because most individuals that have businesses, they're pretty comfortable. They have a savings or some other type of benefits that they may have, a 401k or something they can pull money from temporarily. Whereas when you have someone that's a cashier, or someone that works at a car wash, or someone that's working as a dietitian, or someone in the hospital that may be doing different various services such as CNA, they don't have those things set up. They don't have the savings. So I'm finding that the rich are still getting richer, or we're maintaining their status, while those that are at a social economic status, they're even getting further and further down the pole with where they're at, and it becomes a great struggle.
Explain to me the thoughts that goes through those first line responders. What are the burdens that they take on?
Well, and I can speak from a personal perspective, because my goddaughter, she had been in New York for months, and she left 3 kids at home, and a little girl, she didn't even get to see her first birthday, trying to be there for others. And I have friends that have children that work up at the as first responders, and they have been severely traumatized themselves. They talk about the doctors and nurses and individuals that have died trying to serve individuals. They talk about they're talking to someone, and then when they turn around and look, that person is deceased. So we have to really look at how we are giving health care even to the first responders. They need counseling, because this is going to stick with them for the rest of their lives. I've seen people come back changed.
If you look at the military, when they go off to war, they come back and be classified as PTSD. If you take the military out and you look at what's going on in America, where are we? What do we do? How do we respond? How do we help?
This is the same process. If you ask me from a professional standpoint, we've done very little for those individuals that have gone to war. We do very little. We do just enough. Because again, it goes back to counseling, understanding the trauma. It all goes back to being traumatized. And when you do that, you impose on a person's mental health. And you can't erase danger that you've been exposed to. You can't erase violence that you've been exposed to. And so we have to find a way to develop behavior modification programs so that we can address the needs of all individuals, the young and the old.
Now, I noticed this. School-age children, they look at the behavior, what appears to be acceptable in the home. Mm-hmm. But when they get to school, they find out that it's not acceptable. They're going to the principal's office. But because the system does not explain to them and expel them, mm-hmm. how will they learn?
Right. The first thing we need to understand, we have to look at that zero tolerance rule that we have in education. And we have to also go back and re-educate our administrators. We need to re-educate our teachers as well to understand child development, because their children are not going to be everything that we want them to be when we want them to be. It's about the developmental stages and periods of readiness. And so what's going on at the home, they may have a little balance there where they can have a little freedom. In school, it's a little more structure, but just as a career educator of 30 years, I constantly see where educators don't want the child to say anything. If the child speaks, it's a problem. If the child doesn't have a pencil, it's a problem. And so no matter what, children in schools are fighting a losing cause. Just like not too long ago, I participated in a situation where SRO had pulled the taser out on a child in another school district. Not because that child did something wrong, because someone took that child's cell phone and didn't give it back, but that child of color was attacked. And so we're constantly suspending them because we are stereotyping children because of who they are. And just an example from working in Richmond City Public Schools in years past, I can remember many years ago when a child of color had a toy water gun, not because they put it in their book bag, because their little sibling stuck it in there and they didn't know. But then there was a child of European descent that had a machete, and that child just got a call home, but the other child was facing expulsion. So this is a continuous process in our education system. We have to have the will and the willingness to educate all children. And I'm finding that a lot of us don't have the will or willingness. You got to want to educate them all. You know, you can't say I'm going to educate this child because of the way their hair are, they got the best clothes, or where they come from. You have to remove that. I am a product of Richmond City Public Schools. I am a child of Blackwell government housing. I know what it is to live that life. I am a 16-year-old mother. But I'll tell you, Dr. Carey, Miss Davis, Sandra Parker, all those individuals, Cheryl Burkett, she's on the school board. She knows how to deal with these things. Utilize her. Ask her to tap in on her traditional standards and values and bring those things forth that made it work. She's one of the good ones that are still left around. But I know one thing, they never disenfranchised me as a student. And here I am now, 4 college degrees later, and working on my 5th.
Now, help me with this. If we look at implementing restorative justice, how do you get individuals to understand different cultures, different ideas, different thoughts, and not shelter them, but at the same time to make room for acceptance?
Well, the thing is, we have to do that, we have to be willing to change ourselves. We're busy trying to fix the next person instead of fixing ourselves. You can't bring about change if you're not willing to self-evaluate, do self-professional development. How do you improve your actions and your behaviors? You have to know what your role is. Then you have to accept your role, but then you have to learn to be quiet. There's something about being quiet because you're able to hear it and receive it and realize you don't have to respond to everything that is said, but you can receive it to develop a plan. Allow people to have a voice. That's the key. Allowing people to have a voice.
Help me put in perspective, receptive. These are what they expect you to do, but give you no room is to think. It's almost like saying what I think is right, regardless of it being wrong. How do we change that?
Well,
one perspective.
Well, the thing is, it's difficult to do that, but it can be done. And if you want to understand it, talk to some of your retired teachers and some of your veteran teachers, because it's just like what they do now. They tell teachers you got to implement something and don't give them the tools to implement it. They don't give them the support and resources to do what they got to do. So we're doing the same thing to our youth as well as to individuals in the community. So those that have the opportunities and the power of the pen, they need to sit down with individuals that they don't want to sit down with You know, we can't pick and choose who we want to sit down with. We need to sit down with people that are going to come objectively, meaningfully, and productive. And we have to be willing to take on their recommendations.
In closing, what would you like to say? What are your thoughts? How do we change?
From a professional perspective, but even just a product of Richmond City, this is home. This is home to me. It doesn't matter that I have residency in DC as well, but I'm here most of the time. I think that we need to take our standards, traditional standards and values, and couple it with the progressive era. So we need to take those things that value individuals. We need to take those things that give people a voice, things that say we care, you are a part of us, and then we need to turn around and look at what they're doing now in the current age as far as progressive and how to merge those two together. And that's what I think we need to do. We need to look at how we're teaching history. We need to let individuals know we can remove names, we can remove symbols, but if we don't make the change in what we are doing in our actions and our behavior, history doesn't change, no matter what we do. And nobody wants to see their ancestors erased or removed, whether you're a person of color or whether you're a person of European descent. This is who we are. We bring balance into the community. I don't think they should remove these monuments. I think they need to let it stay as it is, and they need to put something up acknowledging this is a place and time during the civil rights era that picked up in the 2000 years.
Since you made that comment, I got to ask this question. Because of the limited budget that the city has, what would it take to say, okay, let the statue stay exactly as it is, put an addendum out, but take the money that you would spend to take the statue down and put it into education, or put it in restorative justice, put it in the housing, put it somewhere?
Well, yes, that's something that's very dear to me, because I've been seeing and hearing where places are spending as much as $200,000 to take down statues and putting them somewhere or storing them. That money can go back into the community. Instead of doing that, develop your restorative justice program. Use your police as a tool for leadership and guidance, not as a policing mechanism, but a part of the restorative justice component, because there is a community base to that piece as well. It's not all just about one-on-one. We can take some of that money and we can give people jobs. You can give them jobs that will give them enough income so they can pay their bills. So you're talking about all the money that's being exhausted in this process. Think about how many people that could have been given a job to do certain things. As people of color, we are very good about policing ourselves. Utilize the men in the community. Get those men, get those fathers together. Give them shirts. Let them patrol. Let them talk to the youth. Let them talk. Men are a very big influence in the community with children and the women. So we need to do that. We need to put money into education for revamping how we educate our youth when it comes to history. We don't erase history, because you can't erase it. No matter what you do, you're not going to erase history. It's going to stand as is. You can only create more history.
I want to piggyback on something that was said. There were some prisoners when they had the fire out in California that worked those fires. But then once the prisoners got released, they wanted to apply to the fire department, but they said they couldn't do that because of their felony. How do we change that?
Well, we talk about double jeopardy in our legal system. We're engaging in double jeopardy on the civil side. They're paying a price for whatever they had to pay the debt to society for. They've already paid that debt. So once they've paid that debt, they shouldn't have to come out and pay it a second time. So that's double jeopardy, and the government is allowing it by not imposing legislation to say we can't do that. Because, we're talking about rehabilitation. The prison system has fallen down with that. They don't offer as many programs as they used to. They don't give the individual skills. They don't reach out to the community. And when you talk about the fire department, if someone has helped to put out a fire and they have demonstrated their skills and abilities and have gotten some type of certificate or accommodation or acknowledgement, why aren't they good enough to fight fires? Why can't they come out and be productive? I know that one of the systems years ago when I worked for correction education, Crawford used to have an optometry program where they were setting up for individuals to come out to have a job in optometry. That's what's supposed to be happening. It's supposed to be correction, rehabilitation. It's not designed to keep individuals down, because what I see is happening, this is to I call it a culture and social genocide of a culture. Lock them down and keep them down as long as you can, because it allows for brown babies not to be born. So we have to be real about that too, about that aspect, because there's some very strong men that made one choice in their life one day. Whatever that choice was, they paid the price. But that doesn't mean that's who they really are. Now don't get me wrong, there are some people that they have a sociopathic way with them, but that's not the majority. So, you have to look at the growth and development, and we got no parole. These individuals people are ready to come out and make change. You got people that can influence their youth, that can influence the community. Reach out, bring them in, give them an opportunity.
I'm gonna have to start this off and say shit. If we look at our schools, at one point in time we had trades in the schools. Auto mechanics, carpenters, electricians. What happened?
I'm going to tell you from my professional perspective, that was another means to disenfranchise and ensure that those prison beds are filled. Because when Bill Clinton was president and they did the no parole here in Virginia, it was a guarantee that those prison beds would be filled. And that's when all these persons went up in Virginia during that era. And so you have to when you have individuals that have a trade, the trade is the only profession that's never impacted by the social economy when it collapses, because you always need a plumber, you always need a mechanic for your car, you always need an electrician. And to remove that, everything that's happened in the education system is designed for me to have people that are in poverty or people that are disenfranchised the inability to be successful. And that's one of the reasons why I'm looking at opening up a school now myself, to ensure that every student that goes through that school have access to a vocational trade before they leave.
Because it's almost like saying, as long as you can do something with your hands, you can work.
Right.
But they don't push you to go to college and go work for somebody else.
Right, just like Richmond Public School, I just learned about a month ago, Richmond Public School sold its nursing program to the community college. Why? All the young ladies wanted to go to the tech center to be a nurse or CNA. Why sell the nursing program? Again, how many of our disenfranchised youth will be able to go to community college? Again, suppression.
If we look at where we are in the community, what is the new normal? But it seems as if everything's going to the drones in terms of delivery. What is the new normal? How are we educating ourselves to understand, to deal with? Is there any mechanism in place?
I don't think there's no true mechanism in place for it. I think we're going into an age of technology, but we're not allowing our public schools to educate youth in that direction. It should be a part of their curriculum. I think that from a professional standpoint, because we're going into that technology age like we are in it now, and we're constantly moving forward, it should be a mandate that every individual is able to take a course and training that gears towards the current views of what society is going towards. I mean, just like with education, I knew years ago education was going to be going strictly online, and it's going to be a time where that's what we're going to do. But there are no mandates to ensure that teachers are certified to be online educators. Now look at where we're at now. They're struggling on how to do it. So we need to also make sure that the youth are getting educated in the area.
Well, I guess I'm going to do this again. In closing, what would you like to say? And I'm going to leave it at that.
I would like to say we need to get it right. We need to have equal voices. We need to talk to individuals that we really don't want to talk to. We're all not that bad. You know, we just want to see things right. And sometimes, even when it comes to advocates, I know some of us can be a little gung-ho, but you know, we're really fighting for social justice, education, employment, and the legal system for our individuals.
And for those of anybody who want to get in contact with you, how would they do so?
You can send me an email at eliteeducationalconsulting9@gmail.com.
And on that note, I would say thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.